I am the product of the people of the world who have cherished the vision of a better life for all people everywhere. I am the product of Africa and her long cherished vision of a rebirth that can now be realized so that all of her children may bathe in the sun. The long walk continues. For the youth of South Africa, it is encouraging to know that throughout all the pressing times and solution-seeking moments of the day, you have the courage to turn to the elders. 32 years ago, on 16th of June, 1976, across many townships of our country, sacrifices were made by youth of that time. People laid down their lives for the sake of freedom. Today, their reward, and ours too, lies in you to defend our democracy, not forgetting those who had to surrender their lives for yours to be spared today.
Throughout the ages and in all countries, men and women come and go. Some leave nothing behind. Others do leave something behind, the haunting memory of the evil deeds they committed against their fellow men. Still, others do leave the good works they do to improve the lives of all people. Don't allow people just to talk as if the leadership of the past is the leadership of today. Don't allow people to say, we take inspiration. Yes, don't take inspiration. But more than inspiration, to say, I take responsibility. I take responsibility. Every one of us. There's no reason, actually, for us in this country, 24, 25 years after, to be the way we are.
History gave us a young boy called Holishasha, and you in return gave the world Nelson Mandela, the father of our nation, a great African freedom fighter and a global icon. Let us, as we embark on this new era, mobilize our every resource and summon our every capability to realize the vision of our founding mothers and fathers. Let us forge a compact, not merely as business and labor, not as those who govern and those who are governed, but as citizens and patriots of this great nation, free and independent. Let us forge a compact for growth and economic opportunity, for productive knowledge, innovation, and for services that are affordable, accessible, and sustainable. Let us also forge a compact of an efficient, capable, and ethical state, a state that is free from corruption, for companies that generate social value and propel human development, and for elected officials and public servants who faithfully serve no other cause than the cause of our people. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Those that you elected have now said, send us. They have said, the woman. You have chosen them. You have chosen them to safeguard your rights, to improve your lives, and to that should be united, strong, and truly free. You, the people of South Africa, have sent them, and you have sent me as your president. Having taken the oath of office, I am saying now, South Africa, yebo, kuthuma mina. And I pledge here today that I will serve you side by side and work with you to build the South Africa that we all want and deserve. A new era has truly dawned in our country. A brighter day is rising upon South Africa, and a brighter day is rising upon our beloved continent, Africa.
The world is not in a good place. And really, we have an opportunity to dig deep and to decide to craft that future, not be decided for us by just a few people who are about what they want and not the needs of the people around the world. And it's really important that we don't keep silent, that we do stand up for what we believe in. So it's a real pleasure for me to join you today to launch the Leading Like Mandela initiative, which will provide us a really strong platform for development and intergenerational dialogue, and that intergenerational is so important. There is the wisdom of those who've experienced, and then there's of course the energy and the aspirations of the vision of those going forward. That intergenerational dialogue must happen.
Thank you so much. We have heard from our father of the nation. We have heard from our Honorable President, Ramaphosa. We've heard from the Mandela family who continue his legacy. And we've heard from the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations the importance of intergenerational dialogue. And that's what the Mandela Talks is about. It's providing that platform for us to now come together and to be able to work together. And as our President said also, it's not, and Nelson Mandela has mentioned, it's a collective effort. And this is what we're here to do. Before I welcome our honored guests who will deliver the keynote for this session, I would like to ask Jessica to introduce him or just to say a few words, please. Dr. Leopold.
My mind and my knowledge of myself is formed by the pictures that are the jewels around our African crown. The pictures that we end from Isandlwana to Khartoum as Ethiopians, as Ashanti of Ghana, and as the members of the desert. like Mandela. This call is what defines us. Atuzizwa kailoko kwama tiba umana lechukile kama kushamilo dikai era nakakhala kuma makhoba namakhoba ngethuthi nakokumefazo nathwadilizisho lamadoda ngaxeshani kahlale madoda kahlale amaphosa abathethe ukuzuma ningayikhomba nganyamba ngoba thina sifuna ukudla amazimba. Come on, baby, once there. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the plains, the rivers, the seas, the trees, the deserts, the flowers, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body is frozen in our Atlantic snow. It is stored in the warmth of the sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday. The clack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lest by lightning, having the call of both shining and hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the white blooms of the citizens of the veld. The dramatic shades of the mighty Drakensberg, the soil-covered waters of the Ligwa, and the sands of the Khalahati have all been the partners of the set or the natural state of which we act out the foolish deeds of the fear of the day. Remember, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Remember, we're the ones that made it possible for the world markets to trade in gold, in diamonds, and the food our stomachs create. Remember, we're the grandchildren of Nongose. We're the great-grandchildren of the warrior men and women that designed the cook on the ledge. The patriots in purple and patriots took to battle. The soldiers, Mushwash and Guguyanen, have never to dishonor the cause of freedom. Remember, we come from all those who were transported from India and China, whose being solely the fact that they could provide physical labor. Those who taught us that we could both be at home but for labor. Those who taught us that the human existence itself demanded freedom as a necessary condition for human existence. Matiba, remember, being to the koi and the sand, whose dissolate souls hold the great, expansive, beautiful cape. They who fell victims of the worst merciless genocide our native land has ever seen. They who were the first to lose their lives in the struggle defending our freedom, independence, and identity. And they who, as the people perished in their slum. But today as a country, we're still giving audible silence about these great ancestors of the generations that live, fearful to admit the horror of the former deed, seeking to obliterate from a memory a cruel utterance, which in its remembering should teach us not, and never be human again. The human presence among all these, the feature on the face of our native land that's defined. I know none can challenge me when I say I'm an African. Tina get was as your so to Gangato. Sichokwe mzukana kahohlali. Kuba kaloku madoda uthi abamkhayile into ethu alonto. Uba bengeni njeke madoda bengasayi kulunga. Kwaqala ukulunga.
I'll be part of your voice. Just Africa. So thank you so much for that. It gives me great honor to welcome our esteemed guest and keynote speaker for this session, Dr. Rio Koza. I was fortunate to have served under him when he was chairman of ESCOM. And when he left ESCOM had left. When the minister spoke earlier today about ESCOM having the amount of debt that they have. And when he left, ESCOM was one of our the jewel in our crown. So it will be good to hear from him. He's even written the book, as we know, Let Africa Lead, The Power of Governance. And we wrote that forward to his book. And even President Thabo Mbeki also put it in the book. So we are in esteemed company, a great thought leader on leadership. As we said, this is intergenerational dialogue. A man who has lived as a leader, who is truly African, and one who can share great pearls of wisdom on leadership in Africa. So without further ado, I'd like you all to join me in welcoming Dr. Yoko. May I ask you, where would you be?
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. Your introduction made me feel rather small and inadequate to the task. Who would be courageous enough to speak after the Imbongi had delivered just about everything that needs to be delivered in torrents of eloquence? This is perhaps one of the best days ever in my 70 years of existence, to be preceded to clear the ground. Thank you very much, Tati Engos. Can I comment a little bit, just before I deliver what I need to deliver, comment a little bit about the role of Imbongi. The role of Imbongi is to extol good leadership. The role of Imbongi is to highlight and accentuate that which is good about the political economy, if you are living in a political economy. In years gone by, the good things that were said by the Imbongi about those that led well were also balanced off by somebody also in royalty called the Royal Vituperator. Now, the Royal Vituperator was a critic. He is the only one who had the right to say to the emperor or the chief, it does look like you are naked. It does look like you have warts. It does look like you are not flawless. So I believe it is time that we actually listen to our Imbongis, extol our virtues, and make sure that there are also royal vituperators that will actually bring to the fore our major national vices. And if there is leadership, let's extol it. If there is misleadership, which appears to be the case right now, we should actually have the courage to bring those that mislead to book. In electing our leaders, we shouldn't just wait for waves of populism to cast them ashore. They must actually earn the leadership. We should actually be, as a citizenry, we should be in a position to say, we prescribe the following as a positive that we'd like to see in our leaders. We should also, however, be able to say, we proscribe. In other words, we say these are the thou shalt not about leadership. If a leader in the 21st century wants to lead us, they must qualify. They must be able to deal with complexity. They should be able to deal with the phenomenon of globality. In fact, it so happens that some of our leaders cannot even spell the concept globalization. They must also, I should imagine, have a basket of concepts that enable them to think, reflect, provide the requisite leadership. You cannot have a leader that is not even shy to say, I don't know. You have to have leaders that do know. If you don't know, Try and be a leader, but don't lead the nations that we believe should be led today. So I am supposed to share a few thoughts with you on current reality, challenges and consequences of poor leadership in South Africa and Africa today. And this in the context of leading like Mandela, dawn of the new era of an ethical, values-based and conscious leader. I would add to conscious, because I mean, just about everybody who is not dead is conscious. For leadership, I would add conscientious. In other words, be responsive. You cannot be responsive without understanding. You cannot be responsive without the heart. So perhaps in place of conscientious, or in addition to conscious, I would suggest conscientious. Given that the overall theme of this conference is on leading like Mandela, it might be apposite to open my brief address by quoting this sage, this icon. I quote, "Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world." Close quote. Given that July 18th is Nelson Mandela's birthday, and the theme of this conference is leading like Mandela, it may be apposite to briefly profile him, lest we forget. Global moral leader, African humanist, passionate about national life, compassionate about the plight of humanity, visionary and strategic, committed and persistent, results focused and sagacious. These and other positive adjectives describe the leadership legend that is Nelson Mandela. A fitting cardinal characterization, though, in a sentence might be epitome of effective, ethical leadership in practice. Great leaders or great leadership flows from the ability to engage others from their point of view, appreciating their assumptions or worldviews, and carefully marshalling arguments to move them to your wholesome point of view. Wholesome. Through empathy and moral suasion, transforming adversaries into allies. Integrity, humility, probity, courage, decisiveness. Perhaps I should reflect a little bit on courage. Leadership without courage takes you nowhere. Courageous leadership takes you somewhere. But courage coupled with the courage of your convictions really does take you somewhere. I was just trying to comment on great leadership. I said that I personified leadership whose defining features were integrity, humility. I also need to emphasize probity, because probity is one value that we actually ignore to our detriment. Probity is behaving in a manner that is and seem to be ethical. Not only that is, but that is and seem to be ethical. Decisiveness, steeped in empathy and humaneness. These are the kind of characteristics that we learned from Dr. Mandela. I had the fortune of working with him for 3.5 years as chairman of ESCOM. And he would call me even on Sunday afternoon and say, I suggest you and I consider the following. He would not give instructions. He would actually get you aboard in a manner that makes you feel like you matter. when in fact in relation to him, you actually did not matter. We have known him to live by the tenets of consultation, persuasion, and cooperation, and shunning coercion and domination. Current reality. Today, as we look around South Africa and the rest of Africa, what do we see? A depressingly bad, poor leadership in general, in sharp contrast to what Mandela and his comrades and contemporaries bequeathed to us. The caliber of leaders like Mchunu, Julius Nyerere, Leopold Singh, Walter Sisulu, Albert Lutuli are very hard to come by. What we currently observe in South Africa's misleadership includes plundering of the public purse, grossly dysfunctional state-owned enterprises. If I had time, I would talk a little bit about ESCOM, but I can't, I don't have the time. Pervasive lack of accountability, lack of consequence management to offenders, and disregard of the law with gay abandon. Erosion of parliamentary procedure and decorum by an opposition party whose behavior borders on barbarism. A ruling party leadership that is paralyzed by internal strife, chronic unemployment, and widespread excruciating poverty. Stubborn, sporadic crime that renders policing ineffectual and stifles potential investment. Chronic cronyism and rampant corruption in both the public and the private sectors. Pervasive societal dependency nurtured by unsustainable government policies such as large-scale housing. You don't house people. You enable people to have houses. Who amongst us would like to be housed? I think the litany of social ills and political misbehaviour. Further afield, on the continent, we observe countries whose states plunder state coffers to the point of national dysfunctionality. Ruling parties which have long reached their sell-by dates, stealing election results. Inordinately powerful, corrupt parties which lose elections but come back via the back door to surreptitiously rule from the grave. Ruling parties that imprison opposition leaders, deprive them of chronic medication, and then release them to their death. Leaders who perform commendably in terms of taking their political economy well into the 21st century through zealously embracing the fourth industrial revolution, but at the same time commit the cardinal sin of positioning themselves as president for life. It doesn't matter how good you are, your sell-by date comes sooner than you imagine, and sooner rather than later. We also observe genocidal civil wars that have no regard for human life and dignity. We see putative leaders that take national wealth as their own and externalize huge amounts with relish. At all levels, nationally, regionally, and continentally, we have to contend with poor leadership and attendant naivety that fails to understand that the 21st century scramble for Africa will not be as colonially naked and rapid as that of the 19th century. That it may come dressed in such niceties as combining aid with trade and investment, or such ostensible generosity as offering to build palatial headquarters, or even providing long-term loans with hidden catches. Are our leaders aware of this? Some of the challenges and consequences of poor leadership, I'll try to gallop so there can be discussion. Africa's challenges to confront and overcome poor leadership are varied and numerous. They include being held hostage by historical comradeship, where African leaders who are former comrades in arms should admonish and hold each other accountable. They tend to be lenient and unduly accommodating, loath to upset historical favors and friendships. This way, African leadership fails to teach one another useful moral lessons. Next, the tendency to reinvent the leadership wheel rather than refine it. Successive leaders are given to building from scratch, even where their predecessors may have left a worthy legacy, particularly where opposition parties succeed as while ruling parties. This way, African leaders fail to build leadership institutions. I dare say, success without succession planning and practical implementation portends failure. Next, failure to deal with xenophobia. Whereas Africans and African countries are renowned for their hospitality, they tend to fail dismally when it comes to giving refuge to fellow Africans fleeing from oppression and economic squalor. The result is Afrophobia as opposed to xenophobia, given that immigrants from elsewhere in the world are welcomed with open arms and not asked any questions. As a continent in fragments, Africa must learn to integrate and be accommodating where fellow Africans are concerned. One hopes that the newly launched African Intra-Continental Trade Agreement will go some way in cultivating and nourishing fraternal relations across Africa. Next, globalization. I just want to reflect briefly on this because that's where we tend to fail dismally as Africa's leadership. And we have a very, very friendly, smiling people from the East taking us to the cleaners without us being aware. The world has become one large marketplace where once foreign goods are available to almost every human on earth at the click of a button, or in many instances, only a few minutes commute from home. The world trade is driving global economics and political agenda while shifting the balances of power from nations to super brands. Globalization has meant the homogenization of labor, resulting in wage competition from all corners of the globe, driving the cost of unskilled and low-skilled labor down to the bare minimum. The globalization of trade has resulted in the balance of power shifting to the more industrious nations, benefiting from the healthier margins extracted from the ownership and beneficiation of raw materials, natural resources and minerals, whilst the nations with less sophisticated labor have had to accept the marginal wages offered by the industrious nations. When we reflect on our awareness of the global market and political forces, and importantly, our participation therein, it seems that we are distracted as we squabble amongst ourselves while the world superpowers are deciding who will rule the world commercially and economically. Africa will be the world's next great frontier, everybody shouts, but not for Africans. Unless we actually really wake up to the reality. It will be for the likes of China and those Western powers that scheme successfully in the 21st century for Africa. They are subtle, complex, and surreptitious in their approach. Poor African leadership will sleep through this recolonization revolution. Our poor leaders have no robust continental policies and no grand strategies to deal with this challenge. Tiny little economies like Lesotho believe they can engage in a tango with China. If you have an elephant and a mouse in a tango, there is no doubt that you cannot doubt who will be trampled over. And unless Africa realizes that, and we come together as a continent, and also recognize that China is not a country. China is a huge continent. And we've got to deal with China continentally. We are the ones who should actually put together the conditions for coming to invest in our continent. We should also insist on a quid pro quo. If you send wholesome people to our country, we shall send ours to your country too. If you send us bandits, we will also send you bandits in return. But somehow we actually fall short where that is concerned. We squabble over matters elevated to agency through self-serving short-term political agenda that provoke and promote cultural divides and societal conflict. We defend violently our prejudices and mental models and failed institutions, creating the injustices of today and destroying tomorrow's prospects. Meantime, the world's superpowers are spending their time on global policy and governance dominance, influencing opinion to move markets and sentiment to support their goals, accumulating land and mineral rights at a grand scale, and deciding who will ultimately be the laborers and who will be the owners of all the wealth. We need to think generationally and execute with a sense of agency. Africa's propensity for instant gratification is eroding patience and perseverance. Planning with a quarterly, yearly, or at best with a 5-year horizon is very common in corporations and in states. Successful nations, by contrast, such as South Korea, China, even the city-state that is Singapore, choose to think, plan, and implement generationally and reap rewarding results. By contrast, poor leadership in South Africa and most of the rest of Africa tend to consume seed capital instead of investing it for ensuring generations. In order to build the future we all desire, it is imperative to think generationally and act with courage and integrity. It is important that we nurture a culture of smart diligence and enablement that is founded on and celebrates the principles of competent and ethical stewardship, insisting on our leaders to set the example of desirable conduct. Our African leaders must understand that they are not leaders because they have power, public acclaim, wealth, and privileged access. They should not confuse cause and effect. They should not compound the conundrum of leadership by elevating the effect of leadership, i.e. power, wealth, and acclaim as ends in and of themselves, sought and exercised as virtues in and of themselves. They should fully understand that the pursuit of these ends in and of themselves lead us down pathways where it matters not how we acquire these effects, nor for what purpose we employ them. It leads to corruption and venality. the leadership we desire should set us all firmly on the road to regeneration through exemplary behavior, setting high standards and lofty targets for themselves and everyone who takes up the challenge. Such leadership's solutions and strategies will be, above all, doable and sustainable. The principles of their strategies will be designed to be applicable from generation to generation, remaining as effective and as valuable as when they began. This is a leadership which, to paraphrase James Mchunu Smith, commenting on the 19th century African-American leader of great stature, Frederick Douglass, will, I quote, furthermore, prove possible what had hitherto been regarded as an impossible reform, and then become a shining light on which the aged may look with gladness, the young with hope, the downtrodden as a representative of what they themselves may become, close quote. May I conclude? Thabo Mbeki, the African Renaissance man, cherishes a worthy African dream, which I would like to quote briefly. I dream of the realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in efforts to solve the problems of this continent. Close quote. This is a continental dream worthy of our commitment and commanding our active support. Our beloved continent should be populated by Africans who are masters of their own destiny. Africans who have a clear vision and a sense of mission. Africans who are known for their moral stance in the challenges that face humanity. Africans and African leaders who are renowned for their integrity. Africans with a sense of efficacy, who are competent in everything they undertake. Africans who take individual responsibility for their own actions. Africans who, when they look in the mirror, see the hand of an African God. I thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Dr. Yoko. Wow. As we said, this session is really around discussing the current state of South Africa and Africa. I think that's really set the keynote for us, Dr. Yonkoza. Thank you for sharing from your wisdom, experience, and expertise. Thank you. I'd like to call upon our panel now for the discussion and dialogue. Ms. Fasia Hassan. Round of applause for Ms. Fasia Hassan, our youngest NPL legislator. She is on. As we know, Fasia displayed courageous leadership in the Fees Must Fall campaign, showing the power once again of the youth, reminding us of the youth of 1976 when they stood up and took their power back. This is the power of the youth that we have in our country. And it's an honor to have you here with us. Thank you for making time. I know she had to juggle a number of appointments in dash here, so thank you for being here. I would like to call upon, just check with my co-facilitator, who's here. Proceed calling. Advocate Proceed calling. See you here. Thank you. A round of applause for
Abongile, she's in front. I will come and help you there. Oh, you'll find there. Wonderful. And then Professor Dionuso can't be here, but I'm just introducing Chris, who will just be part of the panel for him.
I'd like to acknowledge we have another person who we work very closely with, and the grandson of Walter Sisulu and Albertina Sisulu, son of Maxwell and Eleanor Sisulu Duma. Please join us on the panel. There's a round of applause to share some of the wisdom and experience of the Sisulu family. Thank you, Duma, for joining us. Right, so for our panel, the Miss Earth essay. We said we want to have some of our youth. Are you here? She's left. Okay, she was here earlier today. So we will, without further ado, begin with our panel. As we stated, the focus of this session is really on what is the current state of leadership that we find in the country and the continent at large. What do we need to do about that? This morning we spoke about defining a desired state. In the words of Nelson Mandela, as Dr. Yokoza has mentioned, we require vision with action. So that was having a vision of what is the desired state of leadership. Leadership that is able to take South Africa and Africa forward, to be able to reclaim its power and to ensure sustainable development for the benefit of all its citizens. So in this session, our esteemed panel will be discussing that, and I will begin with Mr. Sia Hassan to share a few words in terms of the current state and being on the MPL, the legislature, provincial legislature, or Gauteng, the youngest MPL, by being mentioned. She is currently seeing the current state first hand on many levels, and first as a youth and a student activist, and now within legislature. So we'd appreciate the words of wisdom from you in terms of that, and I'll go through your
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. The chairs are quite low, so I feel like, I'm a short person in general, but now I feel even more so.
We prefer standing up and taking your rights, so
maybe I'll just stand here. Yeah, I feel like I've set a precedent for everybody to stand, but it's just a little bit easier to see everybody and to connect.
So what did I say when you said you would stand up for our rights?
Yeah, but literally. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm sure those who've been attending the whole day saw that initially I was scheduled to speak in the morning. And I just want to thank the organizers for being a lot more flexible. So I'm going to speak about what I had already planned, and then I'll add in the sort of current element and a lot of what I'm experiencing and observing currently and right now. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was being a young person, not just in South Africa, but being a young person in Africa. Now, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the empirical evidence, Africa has the largest youth population in the world. And we're talking real youth, not like youth league youth, real youth, 19 to 24. And I'll give you some of the numbers. I must push until actual things happen, so that we have real youth league. Right, so we have about, or at least it's been estimated, that we're going to have 226 million young people by, I think it's the year 2055. But even now, if you look at the majority of the population in Africa, it's young, and the median age is 19.5. Now, if you juxtapose this to the leaders that we have, where the average age, if we're being kind, is north of 50, it's actually 62, the average age of African presidents. Now, you have very old leaders for very young populations. And you see this disconnect, and it's not just in South Africa. You can see so many young people who come forward, and I'm sure you've experienced it, just that level of disillusionment, this idea of my leaders don't represent me, I don't feel like my voice is being heard, I don't feel like my interests are being met. And that's one of the big reasons why not just myself, but a number of different young people across political parties actually have entered into the 6th administration. So I think we've made this administration the youngest it's ever been. But that presents many challenges, right? Because it's not just about being a young person. It's not enough to just be a young person and be in the legislature or be in parliament or be in government. It's also about what we bring to the table. And that's really what I want to focus on today. given what I've just told you about young people, it's a ticking time bomb. I think it was last year or it was 2017, the African Development Bank basically did some research and they found it was something like 12.5 million young people in Africa entered or became part of the potential workforce, but only 3.1 million jobs were being created. Now, it doesn't take a genius, a mathematical genius, to tell you that's just about a quarter. It's actually less than a quarter, which means we have 3/4 of young people across the continent sitting and doing nothing. And that's a ticking time bomb. That's why we've seen, okay, it's not the only reason why, but we have seen young people lead revolutions. We've seen young people really just getting to a point of complete frustration. And so let me go back to now what the real point is. What are we seeing in current leadership? I'm very excited that many speakers before me spoke about different characteristics, about courage, about ethics, about how there's been this moral bankruptcy. And all of these things are really important, but what are we doing to ensure we prevent it moving forward? So the first thing I want to talk about is the kind of skills base that we're giving our leaders. And that doesn't just mean we're sending them to university. I'm a law student, well, I'm not a student anymore. I'm a potentially practicing lawyer, but yeah. The point that I'm making is we need to give leaders the skills and the ability to be able to say no to certain things. So number one, that comes with knowing the law, and it comes with knowing the structures and knowing what is and what isn't permissible. But number two, it's also about protecting them. Part of the difficulty, and it's already happened, I'll be very honest, the moment we got elected, I'll show you, I'll actually post screenshots one day, Facebook inbox, Instagram, Twitter, email, WhatsApp, people wanting to discuss potential business opportunities, getting to know the right people, etc., etc. And my answer has become very simple, and I want to keep saying this publicly. It's illegal for me to do government business at all. So that's been my standard answer. But it also doesn't help that people at every juncture also present questionable kind of politics. So I'm saying it's not just about our leaders, I'm saying it's about society as well, right? That we are all part of the same sort of ecosystem, and we must also hold ourselves to that kind of standard. So as much as we want, and our leaders must and will be more moral and more ethical, and I think we will start seeing it because now heads are starting to roll. But it also comes to us as a society. And it's not just about government and in politics. We all know what happens when you get stopped by the cops. Yeah, you know, somebody gonna arrive there, you know, or buy their lunch. That's where it starts. You know, it starts in the idea of thinking, oh, it's just this one time. Let me just ask about the one time. These systems don't work because we don't allow them to work. Because we also have to, in many ways, police ourselves. So that was the one point that I wanted to speak about. The other point I also wanted to speak about our current leadership or current situation is before, maybe let's say before the last two administrations, most of the people in government didn't wake up and want to be career politicians. They were fighting the liberation struggle. And part of that transition then meant going into government. And that's changed, right? It's changed not just with young people, but it's changed just by virtue of time. Because what you're seeing are people entering into the space who never necessarily fought in the liberation struggle, but who actively wanted to become career politicians. Now, I'm not saying wanting to be a career politician is a bad thing. In many ways, that's what we are now. But the difference is, we then have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Because we're not coming from the same group. And I constantly have to remind the ruling party of this, particularly the other sort of leadership, that we cannot keep assuming that our leaders are of a particular kind. The kind of constitution we have assumes in many ways that our president will be an ethical one. If you look at how it's been drafted and how the kind of structures are set up, it's set up in a way that, for lack of a better word, that we would always have a Mandela or a Thabo Mbeki kind of president. And I think that's also something we need to take into account, and it's also something we have to do to create more stringent measures, so that if we have a worst case scenario president, I won't mention names, we have the ability to actually hold them accountable, and not 3 or 4 years later, or 5 years later, now when people are speaking in the third person of themselves, but really in a way that prevents, what we've actually seen. And then the last point, because I know this will be questions, because I know I've gone over the 5 minutes, but one of the last points I want to quickly talk about is this generational gap that we experience. So as much as it's early days and we've entered into the leadership space, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say contestation, but there's a lot of back and forth, and I'll give you some examples. My colleagues that I work with, I am the age of their children. And so when we sit at a table, there's a lot of my child, how are you? Are you looking after yourself? And these are very endearing. And in fact, I take it as such. It is very endearing. And out of respect, I also say, Mama, Tata, etc. We do. But when it comes down to fight the politics of it, there's this difficult dynamic now. Because there's a sense of, and I'm not saying my colleagues try and discipline us, I'm saying there's this element, there's this cultural element that keeps coming up. And I think it's particularly important in an African context because it exists, this thing of age. So because I'm younger, I may not have been in leadership before, but the fact of the matter is I do think differently. And the fact that I think differently is important and it's innovative. Because if we keep doing the things we've been doing the same way, we can't expect different outcomes. But in the same line, because we think differently, because we have these, difficult notions, it's always put down to, but you guys are young, you don't really have experience yet. You don't really know. Just sit down here, just listen, take notes. I mean, yes, I'm listening, taking notes, but these are my thoughts. I'm just gonna say my thoughts, my ideas. So what we are experiencing on the front lines is this contestation of space. And it's not a direct one. It's one of us as young people saying, right, you said you want to meaningfully engage young people. We're at the table now. Don't think that you can silence us just because we are sitting here. And that's part of the difficulty we're facing. Even today, the reason why I was late, I was in a portfolio committee. I had to ask lots of questions, but what are the policy implications on young people? And this is my final point before I sit down. What do we need to do moving forward? Before a policy decision is made, before government takes action, before anything is done, we need to do a very quick analysis. What is this impact on young people? What is this impact on women? What is this impact particularly on young Black women? And this is not an unfair bias. If you look at the majority, not just of the South African population, of the African population in its entirety in the continent, the majority of these populations are young, Black, and female. And so when you are looking at a piece of policy, you need to understand what its impact is going to be, particularly on young people. And they're not thinking that way. For them, it's more about, they'll tell you 10 jobs have been created. Every day I ask, how many of these 10 jobs are young people? How many of these 10 jobs are women? How many of these 10 jobs are people living with disabilities, etc., or differently able people? That's the politically correct term. And so my point here is that moving forward, what we are trying to do is ensure that before any decision is made, before any policy, any piece of legislation, anything is created, we understand what its impact is on young people. And if it's a negative impact, then we need to rework it. And if we continuously ask this question and we continuously say, how are we going to actually change the lives of our people meaningfully in that way? Yes, there's all this bureaucracy, all this red tape, but I really think that we can then start to change and start to structurally alter what we're talking about. Now that doesn't mean change is coming tomorrow. I have to be honest. It means change is going to come in 5 years. Now, while we're working here on a structural level, we also have to be doing grassroots level work. And then we meet each other in the middle. Thanks.
We would now request Lucy Piccoli to give us a few words in terms of what does he see as the current state of the country and the continent, and also in his role as Risk and Compliance Officer at SAA. It would be interesting to understand what are the current challenges and opportunities to be in for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody.
It's been a long moment. That's why we call it the dawn. That's why we call it the dawn of a new era, because we're dawning of our growth.
Thanks. Let me start off by saying that I got a wrong brief. Yes. Be that as it may, I think our first challenge basically is to understand what our constitution is all about. We tend to think that the constitution is a lawyer's document. It's basically a people's document because it embodies our hopes, our aspirations, and our dreams. It's not to be left to those who crafted it and couched it in legal terms. It belongs to all of us. The question that I normally get asked is, how did we get here? And my answer would be, that's a wrong question to ask. Because the issue is, how do we get out of this hole? And then you can ask, how did we get into that hole when we were outside of the hole? Because if we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on how we got into the hole, we might find ourselves digging even further. Because we'll start fighting amongst ourselves. We need to focus our energies and say, let's get out of this hole. And of course, why in this hole? Because of government's failure. We're in this hole because our dreams have been shattered. It should not be a situation where we must think back to those of my generation and earlier with no standing time, pieces of dreams. We don't have to be picking up these dreams if we're conscious of our role and responsibilities. If we're taking heed of what was once said by Frantz Fanon, that each generation, out of its relative obscurity, must discover its own mission to either fulfill or betray, so that we don't have to be fighting amongst ourselves as generations and saying, the last generation is to blame for what is happening now. That generation, as it was put so eloquently in the morning, defined its mission, sought to fulfill it, and to pass the baton on to the next generation, so as to ensure a seamless transition, so that we define ourselves in terms of the current problems that face us. That's the reality. And I often argue that when governance fails, fraud and corruption thrive. It means that we're going to experience, perhaps, let me say, this governance failure would manifest itself in the absence of accountability, in lack of transparency, no responsiveness, the undermining of human dignity and equality, the pressing of the rule of law, and the non-recognition of the Constitution and the supreme law of the Republic. Now, what I'm saying here is not a figment of my imagination, it's not my own invention. It's what we have in Section 1 of our Constitution. These are our founding values as a sovereign and democratic state. This state is based on those values. Let me just also say, can you for a moment close your eyes and imagine a public administration. Now, by public administration, I'm including the SOEs and the public service. Imagine a public administration that is characterized by a high standard of professional ethics, where there's efficient economic and effective use of resources. Again, it's nothing new. It is in our constitution. But we are not doing it. And who is to blame? Because we have abdicated our responsibility and we think it's the responsibility of the leadership. Leaders don't lead followers. Leaders lead leaders. Now, please open your eyes. Who are the five? Pieces of a shattered brain, as I said, stay each other. Is there hope? Yes, of course. But what we need is ethical and accountable leadership at all levels of our society. We need servant and exemplary leaders. When you join the public service, when you are in the executive, we should be guided by one thing and one thing only. Realizing those aspirations that are so well articulated in our constitution. To think back of the struggles that we've engaged ourselves in and see where we are. But what we've seen and experienced over the last few years is a betrayal of our values and aspirations. I believe that whilst we do have various codes of conduct, codes of ethics, whatever it is, those on their own are not an answer. Of course, they are but one part of a critical weapon in our armor as we try to get rid of the scourge in our society. But the problem with the code of ethics or the code of conduct is that people just learn it by rote. People just carry out what it is said for fear of sanctions. But what we need is that inherent voice, that conscience that tells us to do the right thing all the time, irrespective of consequences to ourselves. As we have seen in the lives of true leadership, as epitomized or personified by the likes of Mandela, the likes of Oliver Tambo, and so many others. Perhaps we should also listen more carefully and with a little bit of a different eye to Harold Melvin and the Blues.
Yeah.
Those of my generation will remember what I'm talking about. When he sang the song, "Wake Up Everybody." At the center of that song is the building of a new society, a new world, which starts with a new way of teaching and preaching. And there's no better teacher than your parent. We can be taught to do things in a particular way, yes. But there are certain things that we cannot be taught. But we should be socialized into in terms of our social and material environment. So that, when your parent tells you, "Nana, don't do this," it's not right to do it. That's socialization as you grow up. So society is the basic need of society. That's where our values should be crafted. But the problem we have, as it was explained in the morning, we're faced with terrible socio-economic conditions, which have led to dysfunctional families, where some of these values are not being imparted to the younger ones. Those are the challenges that we have. So Harold can say that let's change the world. It starts with who? With you and I, as we sit here. You don't have to point a finger at anybody. If you have to point your finger for things having gone wrong, ask yourself the question, what did I do when things went wrong. Let me just skip a lot of things. Let me just say this and try to explain it. You know, as we try to emulate with TUT Mandela, who once said, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers fear. Without cause, I mentioned the question of courageous leadership. You know, at times while we speak of courage, when you are a leader, and that's why all of us are leaders in our own lives. Wherever we are leading people. So don't have a point in the question saying that leadership, that leadership. You are leadership yourself. But the issue is that what is wrong in our society has become a norm. We have accepted what is wrong and think that it is right. And when anybody stands up to challenge that, you are seen as being courageous. When actually, you know, where you are courage by default. Because the situation demands that you should be able to stand up and become that. But because of what you've experienced, those who do stand up, that would have to cause, for instance, when, you know, he was critical of governance issues in our country. Whatever, you get isolated, you get ostracized, you get chopped off. Because the overwhelming majority of people who know the right thing decide to keep quiet. So whatever we're talking about here starts with us. It starts with me. It starts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate, for those wise words. And I would also, due to the interest of time, but I wanted to maybe head on to, even though we know you've been taken, appointed at SAA to support with the turnaround and improving governance there. We have a background in governance throughout your history, throughout your career, professionally, with the National Prosecuting Agency and Authority, as well as the work that you, as an adjunct professor at the Nelson Mandela School of Governance. So we are in a esteemed company today, and thank you for your words of wisdom there. Thank you. I'd like to now, our next panelist, Bongile. I spoke about differently. Sometimes we say, but what do I have? What can I do? And despite various challenges, we have a very powerful young lady here who is a social activist, and we'd like to hear what does she experience in terms of the current state. Thank you.
Hello? Is it on? I'm good. I'm gonna take a stand because I can't see anyone. Well, generally that's my default position. But what I noticed about South Africans is we don't really like listening a lot. So yeah, so please close your eyes and imagine. And then it's like, go open your eyes. Oh. So as I'm sitting here, I'm wondering, did we not close our eyes because we didn't hear the instruction? Or we chose not to? Or is it a deeper thing? Is it a psyche change? You know? Is it because we don't trust as much as we used to? We don't value the word Ubuntu. We're thinking that somebody is gonna run a third estate with our eyes closed. You know, a shadow government. You know. So that was my first thought. And then the second thought I have is, well, the truth is South Africans don't listen. case point proven, but we don't. And primarily, we have a tendency to not want to hear youth.